Hello and welcome once again to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is Cyrus here with a new video tonight. I'm asking the question if near-death experiences can provide sometimes false knowledge to people who have these profound experiences. And I base this on a few factors, a couple of theories I came up with tonight, a few things I want to toss out there. Before we begin, if you like this type of stuff, if you haven't done so yet, please hit the subscribe button, the red button down below. Give this video a like, a share, hit the notification bell. All those things will help keep this operation going, so I do appreciate that. And as usual, if you hear a lot of background noise, sirens and dogs barking and people yelling and lots of cars, I'm still here in glorious Manila, Philippines. And it's a very loud place at night. It's a very fun place to go if you like cheap prices. And well, I can't say the food is that good. I mean, a lot of travelers warn that Philippines is the worst place for food in all the Southeast Asian culinary destinations. But I like it well enough, and it's cheap, and the people are super friendly. So that makes up for having like non-stop noise out the window. All right. Anyways, so can near-death experiences provide a false sense of knowledge sometimes? Why do I say this? NDEs were one of my first forays into learning about the afterlife, and I think it's the first step for a lot of people. And also, it's a kind of middle ground area. People might be willing to research NDEs, but not willing to look into direct spirit communication and other sources of information, which is more of my area of interest, as well as like out-of-body experiences, astral experiences. Even though all of these subjects are very well interconnected, they are still, rather I should say, the near-death experience, it has almost more of a mainstream credibility at this point, which is great. I mean, all the hard work of doctors around the world and people like Parnia and others have all come together to help make this subject into probably the way that the afterlife is entering into people's public consciousness. And it's incredible how that's happened, and we can really attribute a lot of this to Moody, who was the pioneer of bringing this into public consciousness. But of course, near-death experiences have always happened, so long as there have been human souls on this planet. But I've always felt a little bit suspect of the subject as a whole, even dating back to the early years of being on Usenet news groups when I was 14 years old on America Online. Because even back then, in the early days of my interest in this field, let me turn off the internet because we're going to hear like the Facebook buzzer going off. And don't you hate that when you hear like a Facebook notification on someone's video and then you think it's on your computer and then you're like checking like who just messaged me? Anyway. So the reason I say this about near-death experiences is because for every really cool near-death experience I read about, for every near-death experience that seems like it represents an accurate foray into the other side, I feel like there was an equal amount of near-death experiences that have this questionable information. Now, specifically, I would be referring to like religious fundamentalist NDEs. You have people coming back and saying, basically they before their NDE they were fire and brimstone. You're going to hell if you don't, vote Republican and attend church and give money to some mega church, whatever the narrative is, right? Some of these people were really fire and brimstone, and you realize, okay, well, clearly this is a bit of a negative interpretation of reality. Then they have a near-death experience, and what happens? It reinforces all of those characteristics. And this doesn't always happen. Many people have NDEs, and they're completely transformed, and that's the majority of the time. It seems like people suddenly are aware of, like they lean away from organized religion and they enter like their own spiritual path. They have a whole different understanding. But then there's those oddball ones where it's like religious fundamentalism gets reinforced. But then there's other types of weird ones too. I mean, I've heard about NDEs where people, were greeted by like mythological characters, or I think there was one that involved Santa Claus I read once. Like, it gets like really trippy and kind of psychedelic sometimes. And this is one of the reasons skeptics give a lot of pushback to the subject, because then they can say, how accurate is this information? And, look at some of these weird ass NDEs that have been popular, right? So anyway, so I think there's a lot of different things going on here. On the Afterlife Topics group, we had Kim, one of the group's contributors, reposting something that was on Reddit. And this was an individual's near-death experience, and Reddit is a very skeptical website, very skeptical community. So it's rare that anybody will have the courage to post about a near-death experience on that social media site. But here is a gentleman who did. And, it is actually a really cool NDE. I like, basically he talks about he's met with this higher power, this guide, and he was asking mentally how old he really was, how old his soul was. And he had asked if he was 14.6 billion years old, or the age of the universe, and the guide showed an analog clock of how old he was compared to 14 billion years old. As like an analogy, I guess, showing... I'm a little bit difficult to understand what that means, but I guess it means that he's like, timeless. Like every soul is, outside of the time of even the physical universe's lifespan, which is another interesting concept as well. So it's he talks about the technology in our world like pales in comparison to the ability to have like rapid fire telepathy on that side, which again I totally agree with. But here's the part where it's very funky, and that's at the beginning of his near-death experience. He talks about, if I said that Hitler went to heaven, would that make you angry? Although it's not really heaven, it's just a natural experience on the other side. If I said that the best experience, the death penalty, was given to those who deserved it the least, prisoners on death row, would that make you angry? Well, the other statement's a little bit difficult for me to understand, precisely what his point is. He's trying to argue that death is a reward, so why should we be rewarding prisoners with death? But I mean, now we're going into like very abstract philosophy here. But it's the Hitler went to heaven part that obviously to me seems highly inaccurate, and I've gone into the Hitler in heaven sort of fallacy before. So what Dante made a good response, and that kind of sums up how I feel. Except I don't agree about the Trump stuff. I'm not gonna go there with that. But this is what he said. So on the one hand, you have this guy's near-death experience telling him that actions and the state of one's soul have no consequences on the other side. And on the other hand, you have every astral explorer, clairvoyant, mystic, and shaman throughout history telling of dark realms on the other side created by the nasty souls of people like Hitler and Trump, right? Where they go to wallow in their nastiness until they wake the blank up. I'll go with the majority opinion. And I disagree with the Trump thing because he can't really compare Trump and Hitler. But there is an argument can be made. Maybe somebody like Trump, who's very materialistic, probably is not going to be anywhere outside of like the kind of lower middle astral realm. Not really seeing greater perspectives. So I mean that's hardly a dark realm by any stretch of the imagination. Whereas somebody like Hitler, who directed the deaths of potentially 20 million plus people, that is that's a stretch to be able to say that somebody like that is going to just be in a perfectly happy, fun, light, upper stratosphere, beautiful, exalted level of consciousness with everybody else. No. There's unbelievable amounts of consequences that happen on a cosmic scale to people who choose to have lives like that. And to argue against that is arguing for moral relativism, saying that you can do any atrocity you want on this world and we're all just actors on a stage. I'm gonna get more into this fallacy later on, the stage actor idea, because it is an idea that many people have near-death experiences come up with. But if you read the near-death experiences, if you read some of these very new agey books, this actors in a stage idea, you'll come to find that it is originating in their interpretations of their experience and much less the actual experiences themselves. So my thesis to this video tonight is that what happens when people have NDEs is they have this cosmic encounter with a higher dimensional being. Some say it's the higher self, but I also think it could just be anybody on that side, because when we go into learning about telepathic communication, like some of the accounts of communication with extraterrestrials, which I'll go into in a future video, we learn how the level of communication is so advanced that they can download like an entire lifespan of information in a split second just by looking at you. And I've heard of people in this world who have encountered extraterrestrials, and they say that the experience is so powerful, it breaks them down to tears. They go on their knees, like it just changes their whole life, just from like one moment of what is to the ETs basic communication. And that's how these higher dimensional beings operate. I think that people who have near-death experiences, they falsely attribute a communication with these higher dimensional beings as possibly being a communication with God, or being in some ways more profound than it really was, because to them it's such a new experience, and they think that they had a divine encounter with some godlike entity. Now, when you study these things, when you do astral experiences, when you communicate with some of these entities yourself, and also when you learn about other people's experiences, as well as the extraterrestrial topic, we get into some really weird territories where we begin to realize that some of these higher dimensional beings, like we would think that a being so powerful as that would be infallible, that they would be godlike and they'd be perfect souls, and everything they say would be pure wisdom. But then we hear about experiences with like negative entities on astral types of levels, like the so-called reptilian extraterrestrial phenomenon, where they have that ability. They can just dump information into your head. They're extremely telepathic. Yes, even some of them can be straight up like negative and have potentially wrong ideas. Although wrong is relative, but they could basically, how we say it, they could be on a wavelength that is not with the best interests of people in their hearts. I'm not saying that this is like what this guy encountered, but I'm saying is that these higher dimensional, if you want to call like sixth density, whatever you want to say, entities who can communicate this way and can appear to us as like gods, they might have wrong information. And then we might have an experience with them where we get dumped all of this entity's ideas and philosophies. That doesn't necessarily mean that those ideas and philosophies are aligned to like objective truth. It may be straight up bad information that's being misinterpreted. And this is something not a lot of people have looked into, because when we take someone's personal subjective account about their near-death experience, we take it at face value without looking closer to what might be really going on. And so this is why near-death experiences require a lot of discernment and being mindful of what the message is and what an agenda might be, and how the person having the experience may be receiving poor information or also misinterpreting their experience, because you may end up in this territory of moral relativism. If you have an experience in a different dimension, it's so profound, you come back to this world and you feel like, oh, nothing here matters. That's the only place that matters. This whole world is a big joke. That's just an opinion. And it's very far removed from what people like Hitler have done, or Pol Pot, or Stalin, or Mao, or Mussolini, or people who go on a path of service to self, which is so malignant that it damages the fabric of existence and the consequences that happen with that. So we hear about this Hitler is in heaven stuff, and you only hear about this in like near-death experiences and a couple questionable New Age channeling or mediumship resources, but you don't hear about this at all with people who seem to be in direct spirit communication. Objective, likely verifiable, or basically accurate information does not paint this picture. So it's just something to keep in mind. I can go on and on about the is Hitler in heaven idea, but I won't do that on this video. I'm going to wrap this one up for now. It's getting pretty late here in Manila. I need to hit the sack. But if you like this video, you can check out Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics on Facebook. You can check out afterlifetopics.com. Check out the books. If you want to support the channel, then you can check out the classes. You can shoot me a message about that on Facebook if you like. I'll talk to you guys next time.